The war continues in Israel, between Israel and Hamas. You have Israel saying that the folks who live in Gaza, 1.1 million people should leave Gaza. A lot of people saying, wait a minute, this is going to cause even more problems, saying that how do you just move 1 million people out of the way? President Joe Biden gave a speech today in Philadelphia where he did talk about what is happening there in the Middle East. Check this out.
I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learned about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release.
So, Michael, I want to go to you. Michael, I'll start with you first. This is... It is just it's interesting watching all of these different things unfold. I saw a post earlier that I thought was kind of interesting. Give me 1 second. I want to mention this, where Axios had this story that the State Department has said there's certain things that cannot. So here it is. It says, Scoop, this is a senior forward correspondent for the Huffington Post. Hours after Israel ordered an exodus in Gaza, State Department officials circulated internal warnings against 3 phrases: de-escalation, ceasefire, end to violence, bloodshed, restoring calm. Why in the hell would we want not those things discussed?
So I'm not certain why. I know we have multiple things taking place at the same time, okay? I'm glad President Joe Biden talked about the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza because, to be quite frank with you, from looking at mainstream media, it appears they value the lives of Israelis more than they value the lives of the 2.2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. And they are living under like segregation-like conditions or oppression coming from Israel, okay? You have Israel dropping leaflets into Gaza saying for 1 million Palestinians to leave Gaza, but they really don't have anywhere to go for 1 million of them to leave. Even though some of them are trying to leave, they're trying to go south. They really don't have anywhere for 1 million to go. This is, I was talking to somebody earlier today about this. This looks like this is about to be another Crusades, which was started out in 1096 AD between the Christians and the Muslims, okay, over control of what they call the Holy Land in Jerusalem. This is about to be a bloodshed. Now, Joe Biden and, quite frankly, the Biden administration, I think, got criticism early on by not having a full-throated distinction between the 2.2 million Palestinians who are being oppressed and Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. And what I mean by that is so much attention was on Hamas attacking Israel, but what was lacking was a history for about the past 56 years between Israel and the Palestinians, okay? And you have a humanitarian crisis going on in the Gaza Strip. One UN person or ambassador has referred to the Gaza Strip as an open-air prison. So now more information is starting to come out about what's taking place in Gaza. But this is going to be tremendous bloodshed coming.
Yeah, and here's the deal, Matt. I mean, this is the thing for me that is, I just sort of sit here and I'm go, what are we talking about here? The reality is this here. Death is death.
Yes.
And if the whole point of a ceasefire, the whole point of ending the violence is to prevent death. And I think what's happening is, and I saw a story earlier to talk about this here, there is such a lust, a thirst for retribution. And I get it. 5,000 rockets come raining down. You want to do that, but that's gonna lead to response, and then another counter response, and the counter response, and the counter response. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about people who are being shipped out and moved out. Hamas has controlled Gaza since the election in 2006. There hasn't been one since. So this notion that all the Palestinians stand behind Hamas, you heard Biden say that, that's not true, but there is just this attitude of, hell, just open the gates of hell and unleash everything. And you talk about mutual self-destruction. Or sorry, mutual destruction. You fired me, I fired you, I fired back, you fired back, and then it never ends.
Yeah, and I think you asked a particularly astute question. Why are there internal emails saying we're not going to use terms like ceasefire and other things that seem to be the focus, should be the focus of anybody involved in policy or in defense, right, is staving off the number of lives that are lost. But I think if we look at it in the larger context of the fact that this particular conflict is the one that is most difficult for anyone in the United States of America to talk about for fear of being labeled one way or the other. Mainstream media, to Michael's point, is everything I've seen has been about nothing but the number of Israelis who have been lost. And you're exactly right. Death is death. It is abhorrent, no matter whose life is lost. But the reality is this geopolitical issue has hugely complicated origins and will continue to be complicated going forward. And even that lumping together of Palestinians with Hamas as though, those aren't distinct contingencies, one of which may not be completely supportive of the other, with, Palestinians not being Hamas, is crucially important. But we don't find that level of nuance in this conversation. And what I always find particularly difficult in this instance is, he's the president, so naturally he has to talk about the number of Americans lost. But when you have thousands of people dying, it seems that if America is involved in this conflict, our primary focus should be how do we stop more people from dying, rather than purely being in lockstep with one of the combatants, with Israel. And I think, if that's the government's policy, then that's fine. But that should be overridden by all efforts to make sure that we don't have continued loss of life. So I think that the media has to be more truthful about how it's playing this and how it is portraying it. And I understand people's fear about not being anti-Semitic or any other kind of label. But if we don't talk about the issues and all of the attendant issues honestly, then we can't meaningfully have conversations about how the United States can help make sure that people on both sides aren't losing their lives.
This is the homepage to HuffPost. Stunning U.S. memo, don't call for de-escalation in Gaza. Also, the Israeli president said all Gazans responsible for attack. Seriously, how 2.2 million people in Gaza, Michael. How do you make the claim that, they're all responsible for the attack? What this sounds like, this just gives us license to destroy it all and everyone.
That's exactly what it is. You know, our sister, Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, she talks about cognitive dissonance, and she talks about for you to dehumanize another people,
Yep.
you have to put negative pejorative terms on these people to reduce their humanity to then justify mistreating them. And this is what it appears is taking place now by trying to lump all of the 2.2 million Palestinians in who Israel has been oppressing for years. Let's make that clear. Okay, it's the same way African Americans were segregated and oppressed by white people here in this country. This is what's taking place now by the Israeli government. Now, I also make a distinction most of the time between what the government is doing and what the everyday citizens feel and what they're doing, because oftentimes, sometimes there's congruency, but oftentimes there's a disconnect between how the government is oppressing the people in another country and how the everyday citizens of that oppressive country, act. But this is how you set up a people for mass extermination. You put negative terms on them in the media to then justify and reduce the desire for other nations to come to their aid. And lastly, there has also been a call from reports I've seen. I think New York Times had an article about this. There has also been a call for all of the Arab, I can't remember if they said Arab nations or Muslims, however they put it, to rise up as well. Okay, and once again, this I think this is going to be another crusade, and it's going to be bloodier and more people dead than the previous 8 crusades.